Welcome back, everybody, to Strange Planet Podcast. And today's episode is going to be about all the Republican candidates that have dropped out of the race. And most of them have now ran back into Trump's arms, which is both hilarious and pathetic. Now, as most of you have known, we've been covering all of the debates, and I highly doubt there's going to be any more moving forward, or I guess we'll see, but I pretty much doubt it. But in recent news, we have Ron DeSantis backing out and then suckling over to Trump again. And basically the same thing with Ramaswamy, if he even had a chance, that is. What do you guys think about this?
Yeah, well, it happened a lot sooner than I would have imagined. I thought that Ron DeSantis would have at least tried his luck in New Hampshire, but he decided that, there was no path forward for him. And rather than drag it out and suffer, another embarrassing loss, he would, just pack it up. In New Hampshire, of course, Trump beat Nikki Haley by a pretty sizable margin. She picked up a lot of votes that DeSantis probably would have had, so it's the anti-Trump vote, but definitely wasn't enough, even with independents able to vote in the New Hampshire primary. So that leaves Nikki Haley alone, and she's not going to debate herself, and Trump doesn't show up for debates. So looks like debate season is over for now, maybe until the general election. There's Ramaswamy. He didn't qualify for the last debate between Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. And so his campaign was already sputtering out. If you can't get on the debate stage, then who are you?
Yeah, basically.
So you're just left with a situation where Nikki Haley is not winning. Trump is solidifying his hold over the party. Nikki Haley might hold out for the South Carolina primary, but since she was the governor there. But at this point, it's pretty clear that Trump has emerged as the leader of the Republican Party. And there's nothing really that any candidate can do to negate that fact. Even with all of the other candidates out of the race, there isn't enough anti-Trump sentiment within the party to eliminate Trump as the de facto nominee at this point.
And the real thing about that is pretty sad and confusing, is that, yes, it is moving in that direction, and it seems like Trump is kind of taking over the Republican Party yet again. But under what context? He hasn't showed up for any debates. There's no plans of what he's going to do. He already joked around about being a dictator. You know what I mean? And if you judge from his first presidential term, unless you were a millionaire or a billionaire, then you probably seen some perks. But aside from everybody else, they saw nothing. You know what I mean? So I just feel like, is that side just mindlessly going in this direction without any policy or procedure or anything? Because it just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I've said this before and I'll say it again. Trump voters did, even if they weren't millionaires or billionaires, they did get something from Trump. And it was championing causes that they themselves believe in, whether it's racial superiority or other types of culture wars where it's people who are afraid of losing advantage or power or perceived power or advantage. They're just afraid that they're going to lose it going forward in this modern era. And so Trump represents those people, and he's sort of their champion for that cause. So he did do something for them. He was elected to the White House and basically had center stage for advancing those beliefs and values. And he got Roe v. Wade overturned. He basically rounded up immigrants and quote unquote put them in their place. And, culturally, Trump voters got a lot out of the Trump presidency. They look forward to restoring that again.
I really wouldn't consider overturning Roe v. Wade as an accomplishment. You know what I mean?
But maybe you wouldn't, but Republican voters would. They've been trying to do that ever since Roe v. Wade was decided. And they've tried and tried and tried. And Trump, with his appointments, finally got it done.
But you do realize, that being said, in the current year we're in right now, you realize in certain states, women that live in those certain states actually now have less rights than their mothers and grandmothers did.
Yeah.
You realize that? Like,
that's what happens when the public allows someone who, and I don't know if his most recent comments on abortion sort of indicate that he is not really a true believer, in the sense that he is, vehemently anti-abortion and wants it banned everywhere. He's content with taking the win in overturning Roe v. Wade and, just resting on that. And, whatever state you're in will get to decide what rights women have when they're pregnant or want to have access to contraception or things of that nature. So he's content with just the status quo right now, which is that abortion is no longer a constitutional right. It is a right to be decided by states. And the Republican Party as a whole is perhaps not satisfied by that, especially the religious right. But Trump knows that he got this win where no other Republican was able to do it for decades. And so he has a lot of credibility in that regard. There's nothing that opponents can really say within the Republican Party against Trump on the issue of abortion, because he delivered.
He delivered, but if you think about it, he delivered in that he had 3 Supreme Court seats that he handpicked and filled. Now, I may have said this in a previous episode, maybe a few months back, but if we painted a pretty picture here, and let's, reshuffle the deck real quick, and I'm going to do a hypothetical here. Say, going back to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, if she, say, before, unfortunately, when she passed, if she had left and resigned, I have a slight feeling that this wouldn't be the case now, because then he wouldn't have been able to pick 3 full seats, and maybe it wouldn't have been overturned.
Yeah, that's quite possible. I mean, at the end of Obama's presidency, he was trying to get her to consider retiring so that he could appoint a new justice that would continue, especially in the event that the Democrats lost the election, because, for the trend was that a party only held office for a maximum of 8 years, especially the Democratic Party. The Republican Party, the last time they were able to get more than 8 years was Reagan to Bush, the first Bush. They were able to get 12 years, but that was very uncommon. That really doesn't happen anymore. And especially in the modern era where voters vacillate between the parties and the elections are so close. If you remember, well, we weren't really of age then or alive, but Reagan won by sizable margins. And That just doesn't happen anymore. Yeah, you had Obama winning fairly comfortably. You had Biden winning fairly comfortably, and Hillary at least winning fairly comfortably in the popular vote, but losing the Electoral College. Those elections were much closer than the Reagan elections. And so there's just, a much smaller margin for error. And there's just it might have been smart or it might have been better if Ruth Bader Ginsburg retired during the Obama presidency. Now, when a Supreme Court justice is appointed, they're appointed for life. So she had every right to stay there.
That's true.
And it's just unfortunate that it also came at a time when Republicans stole a Supreme Court justice seat
right.
from Obama. Obama should have been able to pick a Supreme Court justice at the end of his presidency.
Supposed to be Merrick Garland at the time, right?
And yeah, it was supposed to be Merrick Garland. Anthony Scalia passed away. And so that was supposed to be his pick. But leave it to the Republicans and Mitch McConnell to ignore the Constitution and ignore their constitutional duty to, hold hearings and either confirm or deny Obama's pick. And that, coupled with the fact that we also lost the Ruth Bader Ginsburg pick, that sort of changed the course of history in terms of abortion.
Because my thing here is I'm trying to get the message out to, we got to preserve what rights we have left. And if they can just do that quickly to Roe v. Wade and say this clown was to get elected again, and what's next? Elections? And then there's rumors that he wants to exonerate all the January 6th cultists. Are you kidding me? There's so much circus shit going on that it's unbelievable. You know what I mean? But Mark, how you feel about that?
I mean, it's just been a circus this entire time. And I think with the, Mitch McConnell being the way he is and the fact that they started ignoring stuff. I mean, let's take it back real quick. When it was Reagan's time and Reagan was president, I mean, he was a television star. So he had that popularity where everyone knew who he was. So that kind of started a trend, I guess, with, being on television and, stuff like that. Because, I don't know how people consumed media back in those days. I mean, it definitely wasn't the internet. So I think in our time, the information the access to the information we have is a big thing. Also, I think Republicans are playing on that to give us misinformation, where they like to project, what they do onto the Democrats. Yeah, I mean, coming up with the election and with the justices, and I feel like they've been plotting this the whole time, and just, needed someone who had the balls to say no to the Democrats. No, I'm not going to do what you tell me to do, even though it's my job. I mean, who takes these people to task? That's the problem, I think. When they do something wrong like that, no one takes them to task because, who do you call to be like, okay, so-and-so's not doing their job?
Well, it's supposed to be the voters.
Right.
Yeah, but the voters can't just walk into the friggin', Congress and be like, yo, Mitch McConnell, that thing's been sitting on your desk for a week. We have to wait for election cycles to change that. And at that point, people don't care. It's, politics is boring, regardless of how you look at it. I mean, it's exciting now because we, are possibly looking about changing our way of government if certain people get elected.
I got something else I also want to throw on the table here. And have you guys heard anything about Roger Stone?
Aren't they trying to indict him again or something?
Apparently I want to say there was audio or something specifically, but you guys didn't hear about what he was saying?
I mean, I haven't caught anything recent, so what do you got?
Something about he was basically caught saying that it might be time to kill, I guess, political rivals or something.
Oh,
and he said something about it's time to do it. Let's go find Swalwell. It's time to do it.
Oh,
are you fucking kidding me? Now we're talking about, is this Russia? Now we're talking about killing political rivals. This is where the Republican Party's headed.
He'd be in jail if Trump wasn't president.
Yeah, I don't get it. Rook, did you hear anything about that?
I heard something vaguely about Roger Stone, but did not hear it with that specificity. And if that is true, that is truly frightening, because there are people that will go out and commit horrible acts in the name of Trump and Trump's lackeys. It wasn't too long ago when Nancy Pelosi's husband was attacked in his own home in San Francisco. And
they were looking for her. That's the scary part. And then they settled for him.
Yeah. And it's just, he's like an 80-something-year-old man and getting hit on the head with a hammer because of sentiments that Trump drummed up. He's out there all the time. Or at least at the time, he was out there all the time, with violent rhetoric against Nancy Pelosi and other Democrats. And so it's not all that surprising when one of his supporters, whose mental health is questionable, goes out and commits an act. It's entirely predictable. And for Roger Stone to say something like that in light of incidents like the assault of Paul Pelosi, it's just irresponsible. And the fact that he specifically named Eric Swalwell, if that isn't taken seriously and consequences aren't administered, that is going to usher in a new era of violence where that type of rhetoric is condoned. And we've seen the fascist tendencies of Trump, and we know he sort of looks up to Putin and admires how powerful and strong Putin is. His words, not mine. He, I'm sure, would love to have that sort of dynamic where he's able to eliminate political rivals, and through, if not through the ballot, then through the bullet or other forms of violence. And he doesn't even have to lift a finger himself. He can just open his mouth or have one of his supporters open their mouths and sort of encourage that sort of rhetoric. We saw that with January 6th, where he and his supporters encouraged an insurrection, and they stormed the Capitol on his behalf. And it was just over and over violent, angry rhetoric, and it led to a predictable outcome. And so this is, this is the new era of politics in which that is apparently encouraged or accepted by the Republican Party. Because otherwise, they would have no business with Trump. They would not entertain his reelection. And the fact that he seems to be the de facto nominee says that the Republican Party is okay with this nonsense, this kind of violent political rhetoric that results in real violence and political terror against public officials.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, that could even stem into just like regular people, where you have some stupid MAGA Republican who's a nut, who's driving down the highway having a bad day, and then he sees some guy in front of him who's driving a car that says vote for Biden, and he gets all bent out of shape and starts fucking tailgating them and doing all sorts of road rage shit. I mean, at what point, someone could get hurt. people lead with their emotions when it comes to stuff like this. And unfortunately, we're in a situation where the political environment is very toxic and it's very volatile. Regardless of what side you're on, it's coming to a head. And I think come the first result of a trial with Trump, it's going to go one way or the other. And he's going to get guilty of one of them, or he has to go to jail, and then that's when all hell's going to break loose.
Yeah, and I just feel like consequences for actions, especially like these, are a necessity. Because if we don't do anything, or if we decide to look the other way on this, then guess what? It's just going to be persistent. It's going to keep happening, and it's only going to get worse. And so like sometimes people were saying, oh, well, like with Trump with the hush money, and they got, his 91 indictments and stuff. And it's kind of sad that we're at a point now where we're saying, well, should we do this? Because it'll, or is this like they're like the Russia collusion thing where, oh, it's nothing. That was something. Let's be real. But if he keeps breaking all these laws, they have every right to charge him and to put him in front of court to face this. You know what I mean? So it's not even a matter of a political thing. It's a matter that he broke the law, and this is what happens when you break the law. It's as simple as that. And as you notice with January 6th, a bunch of those clowns were locked up. And that's why I'm over here saying, like, what the fuck? Like, if this clown, Trump, were to get reelected and he exonerates all of them and lets them out, what does that show? That you can storm the Capitol and it's perfectly fine. You know what I mean? Like the rhetoric is insane. Like I just don't understand it. So it seems like you can kind of do whatever you want as long as it benefits or helps the Republican Party. But aside from that, then no, I don't get it. Do you?
I mean, it's all coming from their sense of just he's a god.
But he's not. He's just like second or third generation rich kid that's terrible with money, has more bankruptcies than most people will even be able to even start up. You know what I mean? Like there really isn't anything special about this guy. Like when you brought up Reagan before, yeah, he was an actor and I guess he was somewhat well respected and he was known and people, you know what I mean, knew his character and stuff. It's not the same with this clown, Trump. It's not, you know what I mean? Because he's been a dickhead for years. Long before he was president, he was always kind of a piece of shit. You know what I mean? So like when he does these things or it says these crazy things and just, the chaos that just erupts every time he opens his mouth, it's that part to me is not necessarily shocking because that's always who he has been. But when it starts affecting people's lives and rights are being stripped, then it's like, dude, where are we going? Because like I'm on track to try to make America sane again. And I don't think if that happens wherever, it's only going to go completely the other direction. So, you know what I mean? Like it's a very strange time we're living in these days. But, and they're like you were saying with the misinformation before, that is at an all-time high. And then the sad part about that is now you're at a point where it leaves the voter to choose what he believes is right or wrong, whether or not it is or isn't. You know what I mean? So that also adds more chaos because if you keep getting fed bullshit, you're going to start to believe it after a while, and then that's the sad part because it's none of it is true. And sometimes it's got one of those things where it's the truth stretched out. So there may be like a few things that might be kind of true, but generally the way it was said was not the truth, So I don't think Americans know what the fuck to believe anymore.
And how could you blame them?
I mean, that's true too. That's true too. But when you start seeing the changes in your life happening, especially with the Roe v. Wade, and I feel like that's just the beginning. Like if they can, like I was saying before, if they can strip that easily, I don't want to know what's next, but I think we should be awake and aware to prevent anything else, or if anything, try to put that back where it belongs. Because in my eyes, and this, of course, we're dudes, so it doesn't really affect us. But I still believe that it is the woman's decision because there can be complications in pregnancies where, abortion is necessary. Now, it's not something anybody wants to do. And it's just funny that the guy that overturns it probably had more abortions than most people did. But it's just like a situation where the right has been taken away. That doesn't really ever happen. Normally, You know what I mean? There's rallies, and then there's you are awarded rights after lots of fighting and pushing, you know, but this is the first time we're going backwards. So we're going backwards even in time now. It's not even like it's 2024. It's like 1950 we're going back to. The fuck, how are you supposed to go ahead if you're doing shit like that? You know what I mean? And that's our show for this week. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell icon for notifications. Strange Planet will have new episodes on YouTube every Friday. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.